Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're deconstructing how a 21-year-old prodigy literally changed the DNA of modern popular music. We're going to break down the exact harmonic, technological, and spiritual blueprints Stevie Wonder used to transform not just how music sounds, but how it makes us actually see the world. To frame this whole thing, let's look at a powerful thought from James Baldwin. He wrote that the war of an artist is a lover's war meant to reveal society to itself. So how exactly did Stevie Wonder act as this prophetic lover? How did he use wildly complex harmony and groundbreaking technology to hold a mirror right up to American society? Well, that brings us to our core question for today. How do you shatter what philosophers call the buffered self and teach an entire generation to truly see? In this explainer, we're going to start right inside the sound itself, zoom out to the studio process, and then finally explore the profound societal and spiritual impact of his classic period. All right, Section 1. Independence at 21. Let's jump back to May of 1971. Stevie Wonder just turned 21 and he legally voided his previous contracts with Motown Records, claiming total artistic control. Notice that figure, $100,000. Our sources show that while Motown owed him $3.1 million, he actually survived on a $100,000 trust fund payout. He took that limited pool of money, basically betting on himself, to independently finance his next era of recording at Record Plant Studios in New York. And man, that incredible gamble and his newfound freedom sparked an unprecedented timeline of sheer musical genius. I mean, he produced 4 absolute masterpiece albums in a span of just 5 years. We're talking Music of My Mind and Talking Book in 1972, Inner Visions in 1973, and his absolute magnum opus, Songs in the Key of Life in 1976. So, moving on to Section 2, the technology of groove. How did he physically create this entirely new funk-driven sound? Well, to understand it, we've got to look at the gear. Stevie began working with brilliant engineers Malcolm Cecil and Robert Margouleff on this massive electronic synthesizer known as Tonto. But they faced some really severe technical limitations. The Moog synthesizer at the time completely lacked dynamics and, crucially, had massive tuning problems. It just wouldn't stay in tune. So how did they fix it? Well, the surprisingly simple solution was a joystick controller. Malcolm Cecil actually invented a super cheap joystick to fix the Moog's tuning issues. And this brilliantly simple invention enabled Stevie to physically bend notes and push the boundaries of dynamic electronic sound. He was essentially injecting human soul right into a machine. And this perfectly illustrates his approach to acoustic instruments too. Take the Hohner clavinet, for example. Before Stevie, it was a relatively obscure keyboard, kind of sounding like a harpsichord, but he transformed it into a multi-layered tool. He used it simultaneously as a rhythm section, a harmonic texture, a percussive element, and a melodic hook, all at once. If you've ever found yourself tapping your foot to Superstition or Higher Ground, you're hearing him completely revolutionize funk music with this single instrument. All right, that brings us to Section 3, the language of harmony. So beyond the studio technology, how did Stevie Wonder elevate the actual musical theory of pop and soul? Well, standard pop music of the era usually relied on repetitive 4-chord loops and pretty static grooves. But Stevie, he brought in extended jazz chords, chromatic bass movement, and incredibly fluid voice leading. He basically abandoned those simple loops, making wildly complex harmonic shifts feel entirely conversational, completely natural, and most importantly, super catchy. Let's look at how this builds across specific tracks. In Too High, he's building jazz-like chords in fourths and fifths with these amazing chromatic movements. In Higher Ground, he's literally layering 3 clavinets by physically padding the keyboard to get that really aggressive funk sound. And in Living for the City, he's acting almost like a film director, using cinematic transitions and actually manipulating the cape speed to alter his own vocal pitch so he can play different characters. He merged really sophisticated musicality with raw, elastic, emotional energy. Which leads us to Section 4, social consciousness and empathy. This incredible musical mastery provided the perfect vehicle for his ultimate goal. To really understand his broader impact, we have to look at a philosophical concept from Charles Taylor called the buffered self. This is basically a modern, self-enclosed condition where individuals protect themselves from vulnerability, which ultimately leads to existential isolation and a total lack of empathy. People just get trapped in this protective bubble. And Stevie Wonder's music, it actively sought to shatter that exact bubble. As detailed in the Anselm academic text we reviewed, his 1976 magnum opus, Songs in the Key of Life, was explicitly designed to force insulated listeners to confront street-level realities. The album captures the deep joys and the very real struggles of inner-city America, actively pushing the listener to engage with a world they might otherwise just completely ignore. A perfect example of this is the track Village Ghetto Land. He sings these lyrics over a lush, serene, almost Mozart-like synthesized chamber quartet. He brilliantly juxtaposes this beautiful, high society classical music with bleak, absolutely devastating inner-city imagery. It acts as both a direct accusation of social blindness and a gentle, welcoming invitation to finally connect with the suffering of others. And that brings us to Section 5, Teaching Us to See. This profound thematic contrast is at the very heart of his work, sight versus blindness. Wonder, who has been unsighted since childhood, possessed an extraordinary capacity to feel the world. As he put it, we really feel before we see. We really hear before we see. He used his imagination and deep empathy to perceive truth in a way that, frankly, many sighted people simply cannot. The theological source material we're referencing explains how his artistry acted as a doorway. It broke through what sociologists call the white habitus, which is the insulated, conditioned way that dominant social groups perceive reality. By doing this, Stevie forced listeners entirely out of their comfort zones to truly see the lives, struggles, and joys of other people. What's really fascinating here is how the source text actually compares American race relations to a specific biblical story, the blind man of Bethsaida, who is only partially healed at first and says, "I see people looking like trees and walking." Our sources impartially note that society often stumbles around in this exact state of partial blindness, desperately needing a profound healing of perception to see each other as human beings rather than just objects or stereotypes. And Wonder addresses this directly through protest tracks like Big Brother. He's essentially turning the objectifying lens of the television screen right back on the viewer. He demands true, unbuffered empathy rather than detached clinical observation. He's telling the listener, hey, don't just watch me on the news, come inside my door and actually see me. Stevie Wonder proved that the absolute highest level of musical and technical complexity can serve the deepest, most vulnerable human expression. He used these joyous, completely irresistible grooves to deliver profound social truths. Which leaves us with this final thought for today. Does the media and music you consume leave you in the safety of your own buffered bubble, or does it challenge you to finally open your eyes? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.